Okay, shall we go ahead and get started? Okay, so Guardians of the Galaxy comes out next week. Anybody else excited? Does anybody know what that song was? Had you heard that song before the trailer? Cool. Does anybody know what the name of the song is or who the artist is? Oh, wow. Nice, we got some pop culture fans here. Great. So, Marvel has done a pretty fantastic job in utilizing music to sell a lot of its most recent films. And in many ways, that started with the original Guardians of the Galaxy, who used...
Hey, that's mine. You son of a... Hey, take those headphones off right now!
I mean, that trailer was pretty note perfect. It made me excited, even though I knew that Guardians of the Galaxy was kind of this second-tier comic that featured a talking raccoon for some reason. And it stuck with us because Marvel knows what it's doing. Their marketing department is using a lot of psychological techniques to get us interested just through these trailers that are going to make us spend those $12 to go to the movie theater. One of those is, of course, priming, the implicit memory effect in which exposure to a stimulus influences response to a later stimulus. Like the whole point of a movie trailer is to get you excited about the movie. That's kind of stimulus overload with the music and the explosions and the talking raccoon. But this is something that you can use when you are thinking about content strategy. This is the homepage for the Humane Society of the United States. You will notice that they very prominently feature animals in cages. That's because while everybody thinks that the Humane Society is an adoption agency, that's not what they do at all. So they are using the principle of priming by showing these pictures of puppy mills to kind of just get right out in front of that problem that they know they have and educate people from the very first image that what they really do is not related to animal adoptions. That trailer is also using a technique called anchoring. It's our tendency to rely heavily on the first piece of information offered when we're making decisions. And by using that music from the 70s that we've probably all heard before, they're setting this, they're digging into our brains essentially and coming up with something that we're familiar with, that we probably enjoy to some extent because we don't hear it very often. And it's just going to remind you that this movie is something that you're excited about, just from that very first note. Also something that you can do on the web. It's why we've seen this tendency to move towards these big banner images with headlines recently. Like the common thing is you only have 2 to 3 seconds to capture people's attention, and if they see a giant wall of text or lots of navigation options, they're probably going to be distracted. If you have a compelling image and a compelling headline, that is going to anchor them in the content that you are providing to them. And then, of course, there's the verbatim effect. Like, we don't necessarily, unless you have a photographic memory, remember everything about every piece of content that we consume. But you will remember the song that you heard from that trailer. Again, this is very similar to what we're doing on the internet these days. We're using different colors, we're using different header sizes to kind of separate the information out. We're trying to make it as scannable as possible so the key points are very visible and people can remember those without having to read absolutely or remember absolutely everything that we're putting into our pages. Of course, these psychological techniques aren't guaranteed to work well. When I was putting this presentation together, I went to this website I don't know if you can see in the background there, but there's a shot of what is essentially 3 pop-up windows at the same time on a website. And as I was contemplating whether to download that image to use in this presentation, they gave me another pop-up. So anchoring can go terribly, terribly wrong. They annoyed me. I took a screenshot. I left. That relates to something else. This is loss aversion. Economics teaches us that we have a tendency to avoid losses over perhaps coming up with significant gains. We'd rather not lose more than we want to win. And you know, somebody was paying attention to what Marvel was doing.
Is this the real life?
Let me out of here, Donald, please.
Is this just fantasy?
Come on!
Caught in a landslide. No escape from reality.
I'm going to talk a lot about psychology today in terms of content. The thing to remember that when you're thinking about utilizing these techniques to get people to pay attention to you, like the whole point of marketing is to get people to pay attention to something, when you're driving people to your content, you need to make sure that whatever you are doing to get people there, your content is going to back that up. And that's kind of why I am excited about Guardians of the Galaxy. They rewarded me last time I went to this movie. I had a great time. I've seen it 2 more times since then. They're using Fleetwood Mac in their trailers. And of course, Marvel did a fantastic job too with Logan trailers. I can't believe how they use music in that. And then we get something like...
Come together.
It takes a lot of enthusiasm to remake a Beatles song. And if you're somebody like me who believes that maybe people shouldn't be going out and remaking Beatles song, well, the way that they used that in Justice League made it less likely that I'm going to go see that movie. It made me think that it's going to be exactly like Zack Snyder does with pretty much all of his movies. It's going to be a lot of explosions and a plot that borders on the incoherent. Oh, right. I'm Brett Meyer. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at ThinkShout. We are a digital agency based in Portland, Oregon. We work exclusively with social good organizations from higher education to healthcare to nonprofits. And this is Content Strategy and Popular Culture, Part 2. There really wasn't a bigger pop culture phenomenon in the past year than Pokemon. How many of you played Pokemon? How many of you are still playing it? All right, we got a few. There's no shame. I'm still playing it too. It was a pretty phenomenal success right out of the gate. There were 100 million downloads of that app within a month. 650 million people downloaded Pokemon Go onto their phones within half a year. That's pretty successful. There are currently 5 million active daily users and 65 million monthly users. And it has made, I'm actually not sure how much of the money is going to Niantic and how much of it's going to the Pokemon company, but it's made more than $1 billion from people walking around staring at their phones, throwing virtual balls at virtual creatures. But I believe that it was so successful because they based their entire model on a psychological model that is known as needs theory, developed by the psychologist David McClellan in the 1960s. David said that essentially people need one of 3 things, or even all 3 things, depending on your personality. You are after some form of achievement, power, or affiliation, and/or affiliation. So, achievement. People who are after achievement prefer tasks of moderate difficulty. They prefer to work in which the results are based on their effort rather than anything else, and they prefer to receive feedback on their work. Like, most of Pokemon Go is based around giving that sort of feedback. You advance in levels, you earn badges, it flashes things on the screen as you advance. You battle for experience points so that you can continue to move up. Like, it's pretty clear what the Pokemon folks were doing to encourage you to feed your achievement needs. I think power is pretty clear too. People who are after power enjoy work and place a high value on discipline. A person motivated by power enjoys status recognition, winning arguments, competition, and influencing others. And of course, Pokemon gives you the opportunity to battle and to control gyms. Like, the whole gym and battle system is based around winning, and if you have advanced your Pokemon far enough, you essentially get to be the icon that is at the top of the gym, flashing for all the world to see. Like, it is an expression of your power. Then there's affiliation. Spider-Man really, really wanted to be part of the Avengers. People who have a need for affiliation prefer to spend time creating and maintaining social relationships, enjoy being part of groups, and have a desire to feel loved and accepted. One of the very first things that you do in Pokemon Go is join a team, which supposedly matches you with other people. And when you go into those gym battles, you can do that with other people. Like, it is encouraging you to go out in the world with other folks. My wife and I go around the city every now and then when we have some free time, and we battle gyms together so that we can feed our achievement and power needs. But you think about all of the things that they put into making this game, like every little graphic, the fact that you can change your outfit out, all of the various Pokemon and the balls and the fruits and all of these things that essentially make up Pokemon Go's content model are connected for the purpose of feeding all of those psychological needs. So when you think about it, content modeling is essentially database design. I know this because I Googled content model, but instead of reading the stuff there, I looked at how Google is presenting the results. You can see what Google's content model is here. They've got the title, they've got the URL, they've got a publication date, they've got a quick little summary thing. All of that information is stored somewhere in Google's gigantic cloud. They don't actually go out and look at these things live. They have a database that is indexed for quick search results, and all of those pieces of information are fields that they recombine to give you your search results. Pretty much the same way for any of us who are involved with building websites. We've got a display layer, which is what our consumers see, and hopefully they don't need to see anything other than that. We've got the administrative layer, which is what the content editors get to see as they are inputting all of this content. And then at the very base, we've got where all of that content is stored. Basically, when you are building your content model, you are telling Drupal how you're going to build, how it's going to build that database and where it's going to store that information. So when you're thinking about your content model, when you're building this thing out, you've got, of course, content types, taxonomies, you've got relationships, if any of you are using entity reference or something like that. And you've got blocks. This is a Drupal crowd, so I'm not going to spend my usual time explaining what each of those things are. But eventually, at the beginning, you're trying to come up with something along the lines of this. I've seen a lot of agencies work, and I know that everybody has a functional equivalent of this, where you are mapping out all of the content types, you're mapping out the vocabularies, and you're trying to figure out how all of those little pieces are going to fit together. Like, what are the references that are going to tie pieces of content together? What are the taxonomies that are going to allow the robots to make those connections so that we don't have to do the work, to essentially come up with that seamless experience on the user side. Eventually, that content model gets put into a spreadsheet down to the field level, but hopefully nobody, again, gets to see that. So Pokemon, I think, started with that psychological model. How are we going to reward all of those things? Certainly something that you can do. When we're building content models, we generally try to start with the data. So here is a very run-of-the-mill sitemap. This one was for the University of Chicago Graham School. One of the very first things that we do for our clients, or with our clients when we start a new project, is to do an overlay of the data so we can see how people are actually using their current website. There are little blue numbers on the left side of some of those, there are little red numbers on the right side. The red number on the right side represents the total unique page views that are actually on that page represented by the block. The blue number on the left side are the aggregate total page views for that section of content. So you can already see a couple of interesting things based on this old sitemap. I don't know if everybody in the back can see it, but they gave me a laser. I'll try to behave. You can see that those two sections represent pretty much 50% of their entire site traffic, and yet they've got this massive information architecture in the sitemap that is also displaying a lot of things that people have, over the years that they've been using the sitemap, demonstrated very little interest in. And we dug a little bit deeper, and we looked at their program page. It's a university, so they offer programs. The programs are comprised of courses, although they did not actually have content types broken out like that at the time. So this is going to be probably a little hard to see, but you can see that for the most part, there's not a lot of order to how they're constructing those program pages. Like, everything starts with the about, but then as you're getting down to it and those more complicated things, they're just kind of throwing pages up there wherever they want. And if you take a look at how the red numbers compare to the section total, all right, I won't bore you with a laser. Basically, what we can see in that data is that people are largely interested in three things from this bunch of information that's being put up there. They're interested in how they can apply, they're interested in the curriculum for the courses, and they're interested in how much it's going to cost them, naturally, because the University of Chicago is not the cheapest place in the world. So we took that information and we structured a content model based on what we knew about what people were looking for. We created the idea of the program, which is made up of courses, and it has associated events and perhaps some news. And then we moved into the wireframes, and in the wireframes, you can see right there at the top, we've given them two different navigation options. And there is a very prominent navigation where they can put the information that people are most interested in, the curriculum, the tuition, and how to apply. And then all of that more extraneous information is moved down into a flexible secondary menu that does not get in the way of the primary motivations for people looking at this content in the first place. And of course, we've structured it so that all of the component parts, things like events, things like news, all they're doing is associating that through entity references so that the page can automatically build that in, as opposed to what they're having to do at the moment, which is kind of hand code the HTML. You can see this in the final design as well. Very prominent navigation. Some smaller secondary navigation, and then you can see that we've also been applying those principles that I was talking about before to structure how information is displayed on the page. Priming, anchoring, and the verbatim effect are all things that agencies are using to make content more usable, more readable, more legible on the internet. But back to Pokemon. You don't want to get so caught up in your model that you're going to assume that it's going to work forever. And you have to remember that when you develop this model, when you're telling Drupal what tables to create and how to store all of that information, as soon as you do that, you've made it a fairly expensive and complex prospect if suddenly you decide that you're going to go back and change those things. Adding new content types, maybe not so hard. If you want to go back and change a lot of the fields on those content types, if you want to change the way the relationships work, that can take a lot of time and expense. And that's kind of what Pokemon got locked into with this model that they created, because the achievements got harder and harder and fewer and far between. Like moving from level 32 to level 33, I think takes something along the line of the same number of experience points as moving from level 1 to level 20. So you were getting fewer and fewer rewards. And eventually, it's just the kind of the power people who are sticking around, the people who really like having those level 10 gems guarded by a 3000 CP Blissey that nobody can ever defeat. And it kind of discourages the rest of us who are maybe a little bit more casual about this. But the whole incentive to play, all of these things that they built into it for achievement, for power, for affiliation, are not really happening because it's taking them so long to go back and add new things to the platform. Because in the end, there are only so many things that we can pay attention to. And that is kind of the problem of narrative. Our stories don't exist in a vacuum. But everybody loves a story. And this is essentially how human beings connect at a very fundamental level. When you come to DrupalCon, you've probably reconnected with people that you haven't seen in a year. You've probably met a lot of new people. And it is our basic tendency, I don't think any of you are surprised that if you think about it, what you did was tell them stories from what's happened to you since you saw them last, or trying to find points of connection between yourself and new people who you just met by telling these stories from your life. This is what I do, this is who I am, this is what I like to do. This is kind of how it's been going since people first started talking. We're social creatures. The tricky part is that everybody's the hero of our own story. We only have access to our own experiences. Everybody sitting in here watching this presentation, this gentleman here has a different angle compared to somebody who's all the way in the back. That's going to affect his experience of this very presentation. Maybe somebody in here liked Suicide Squad, so you stopped paying attention during the whole Pokemon part and you're just working on a zinger you can hit me with during the Q&A. Everybody thinks you can only access information through your senses, basically. Everybody has a story, and there are a lot of stories in the world because there are more than 7 billion people. So I fly a lot for work, so, landing in airports at night when you're flying over all of these lights from the houses, from the cars that are moving around, I encourage you to just look down when you're going home and think about those people in terms of their stories. Every one of those people has unique experiences. Every one of those people is experiencing the world and developing their own stories. And those stories, depending on how they're told, can have a very big impact. Not like Deep Impact, which was not very good and probably made Armageddon look good, but basically anything that we pay attention to, any information that we consume, is going to influence us in some way or another. This is a quote from Tim Wu, who wrote The Attention Merchants. I've given portions of this talk before, so it was a book recommended to me based on that. Tim essentially wrote a history of how people pay attention to the world on advertising in the media. So if you're interested in anything that I say today, I highly recommend that book. I'm through about 80 pages so far. It's really cool. But basically, every second our senses transmit to our brains 11 million bits of information. So the power of human beings to pay attention to something is predicated on our ability to ignore most of the information that's coming to us. We are always paying attention to something, but we're ignoring huge amounts of information as we go along. And what we pay attention to and the way we pay attention to it is what's shaping our worldviews. So let's talk about Disney princesses for a moment. I bet y'all didn't see that coming. Think about what Disney was doing back when they started with Snow White and Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty and what they were after. I'm going to read you what was some advertising copy from roughly the time that Disney was starting to make these movies. I didn't write this, so please don't throw anything. Edna's case was a really pathetic one. Like every woman, her primary ambition was to marry. Most of the girls of her set were married or about to be, and as her birthdays crept gradually toward that tragic 30 mark, marriage seemed farther from her life than ever. That's the insidious thing about halitosis. You yourself rarely know when you have it, and even your close friends won't tell you. That was one of the very early ads for Listerine. And you look at those ladies up there, and basically what they were doing in those movies was that they were destined to marry. The whole point of these early Disney films is that women were going to find a man to settle down with, and that person was going to take care of them. Disney was essentially following the fashion of the time. But people went to these movies, so seeing this thing reinforced that in people's minds. Disney's been changing. We've got Jasmine from Aladdin. We've got Belle from Beauty and the Beast. We've got Mulan, eponymous. And actually I don't think Mulan ended up marrying, but there was a man who came back at the end of the movie. While there are men involved and these women are actively engaged with those men, the relationship is kind of subsidiary. Like, they are going to end up with the men, but these heroines are really spunky. They do things for themselves. They don't take a lot of crap from the man, and they end up driving a lot of the plot points. They're not just people who are sitting back and hoping that Prince Charming is going to come rescue them. Stories reflect and shape our culture. And now we've got Disney today, Rapunzel. We've got these sisters from Frozen. And most recently we have Moana. So Rapunzel, I believe, did end up getting married, but that was subsidiary to the whole story, right, Stephanie? Yeah. And of course, Frozen was a sisterly empowerment movie. Like, there was the whole marriage proposal thing. That was thrown off, and the whole movie was about the relationship between these two girls. And Moana, I mean, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is essentially an annoyance. She goes out and she saves the day. So you've probably heard maybe some conservative criticism or critique of this, that Disney is trying to shape a particular opinion. They're trying to create this worldview that women, heaven forbid, are equal to men and are able to go out and do these things and save the world. Well, damn right they are. Disney is promoting the idea of girls' independence and essential worth. And yes, they have some things to work on in terms of body shape and maybe some of the diversity and the stereotypes that they put in their movie. But this is how narrative works in the world. Educational systems do this. Everything does this. The point of narrative at this point, when you think about pop culture, when you think about these movie trailers trying to get you to do something, is to shape your opinion in one way or another. It's trying to take your attention, and it's trying to use that experience to guide you or reinforce something in the way that you think. It's changed a lot in the last couple of 100 years. You think about the information that you had access to 200 years ago, even if you lived, say, in New York City. Maybe you had some books. Maybe you had a piano, but there were really no newspapers, there was no radio, there was no television. If you wanted something to pay attention to other than the apartment or the house that you lived in and the people in that house, you actually had to go outside and walk on the street. And even then, there were just things like signs for barbers or signs for doctors. That was kind of the extent to advertising, to marketing, to people trying to take your attention away from what you wanted to pay attention to and direct it in a certain way. Of course, all of you are here because we are building the internet. And the internet is all of the information in the world, all at once, all for us. This kind of narrative, this storytelling, this ability to get out on the internet and use words and images and moving pictures and sounds to share our experiences, this is how we're trying to get beyond the fact that we only have access to our own experiences. Like, the history of human communication can be read as we're trying to make more connections so we can understand more than just what our senses give us access to. And there was this thought that with the internet, with social networks, with this ability to put all of this content out there, that this was going to bring us together. It's going to be, us right here. We've got our circle of friends. They've got their circles of friends out here. And we were maybe going to share that perfect news link or put out an opinion on Facebook or write a great blog post. And it was going to tug those people in a way that we wanted them to go. We were going to shape their opinion by putting our stories out into the world. Instead, we've taught robots to be racist. Did anybody see this last year? Microsoft had to pull one of their AI bots off of Twitter because within 24 hours it went from saying things like, "I love all humans," to saying Hitler is great. This is because a lot of the AI stuff, all of this artificial intelligence that people are trying to train into these bots, into the robots who are going to probably take over from us at some point, using something called the Common Crawl. This was in 2014. It was a large-scale crawl of the internet, and it ended up coming up with 840 billion tokens, or essentially words, for these robots to learn from. And the way that they're building these AI models is essentially through word association or word embedding. So if you have the word dog, they're trying to teach the AI that puppy, doggy, canine, all of the various dog breeds are somehow related to the word dog so that they can learn basically that this is a concept that goes beyond a simple three-letter thing. And then the AIs are evaluating the closeness of their words to build these models. The problem was the AI could not distinguish prejudice from common language, and as I'm sure you all know, the internet is full of things of questionable truth. So when they built all of their models for themselves, when the AIs were out there learning, they were taking not just all of the information that we would consider scientifically backed or valid or truth, it was taking all of the information from everywhere on the internet, regardless of its value or the level of truth associated with it, and it was building its artificial intelligence based on everything on the internet. Because language reflects facts about the world. And when we, as content strategists, as website developers, as people using Drupal to create these sites where people can put this information up there, we're really fighting against two forces. One of those is confirmation bias, which I mentioned earlier. I could present you with the most compelling data in the world that cats are better than dogs. And if you're a dog person, you are going to disregard that level that data because at a very basic level, you know that dogs are better, and no amount of data is going to persuade you that you're wrong. People go with their gut, they go with emotion, and if the content is not in line with the data, we'd have a tendency to dismiss it out of hand. People like to get information that reinforces what they already think. The other problem that we're facing is that there's only so much attention to go around. Essentially, attention is a zero-sum game. You only have so many hours, so many minutes in the day. You have to sleep, you have to eat, you have to get up, you have to go to work. So all of this information that we're putting out on our websites, all of the information that we're competing with Marvel and DC and Disney and Nike, all of this is to get some amount of people's attention so that they will listen to us and we can try to shape their worldview. The point of popular culture is to get you to pay attention to something and then hopefully spend your money. And I am happily going to spend money on Guardians of the Galaxy next week. They've got a whole arsenal of tricks to get you to do that, and I've barely scratched the surface with the few things that I've presented here today. I could have spent a lot of time, I could have spent our time together here talking about content audits or editorial calendars and all the things that make up a good content strategy. Those are great. But you know, the best content strategy in the world, the best model, the best content model that you come up with is not necessarily going to cut through the noise. And I believe that the only way you can cut through that noise if you have a fundamental why behind what you're doing. Let's say you're going to start a shoe company. Why? There's Nike, there's Adidas, there's Converse, who I think is actually owned by Adidas right now. There are dozens and dozens of successful shoe companies at this point. So if you're thinking about starting a shoe company, you have to have some compelling reason behind it, or people are not going to buy your shoes because there are so many options out there. And you've probably seen this on Facebook with all of the get your food delivered to your house and you can make it in 30 minutes, the Dollar Shave Club, the people who will choose your clothes for you, they've seen problems with the way that retail works, and they thought, hey, the internet can help me do that better. We can use the internet to get people what they want in less time for less money, and they don't actually have to go out and do things. They have a very compelling why behind what they're doing. But if you're not essentially coming up with your content strategy around why you are putting this content out, you're probably going to have difficulty convincing people to pay attention to you. So I do want you to be able to tell your stories, and I do have a number of things that ThinkShout basically puts into practice when we're building these websites. One, you have to put your constituents first. You have to put your users first. People are not necessarily going to care about what you do until you give them a reason to care about it. The whole reason that we're building websites, the whole reason that Drupal is great in its flexibility and kind of infinite expansive capacity, is that we can put content up there that hopefully people are going to find valuable. But again, you need to get back to the why. We've had the privilege of working with the Southern Poverty Law Center over the last couple of years, and they put up a lot of content. They have thousands and thousands of pages. They have more than a dozen content types. But at heart, what people are coming to the SPLC for is news. People know that they're a trusted resource, or something that people should, or some folks hate, and they actually get a lot of the people on the other side of the aisle coming over to see what they're doing. But it's basically a news site. So when we were working on the content strategy for the SPLC, we made it news-centric. Like, people want to see what's happening now. They want to understand where they can go to find out what is happening in the world of hate in America. And then you look at something like the Los Angeles Conservancy, who we've also worked with. Their mission, the why behind what they do, is to preserve historic buildings in the Los Angeles area. They know that most people are not going to care about the preservation of historic buildings. What they want to do is see those historic buildings. They want to get tours. They want to go and experience the buildings themselves. So this entire site is built around the concept of how do you get into the tours? How do you experience the buildings? And the thought is that once they experience the buildings, they're going to be more likely to support them. But until they have that epiphany, until they have that actual experience, they're not going to care about it too much. And of course, we try to keep things as simple as possible. There is a lot of noise in the world. We've been working with a couple of new clients. Both of them, for some reason, have a section on their website for recipes. Recipes have absolutely nothing to do with what either of these organizations is trying to do in the world. It's just that at some point, somebody said, hey, you know, people like to cook. As part of your content strategy, why don't you try to fight the SEO battles to get them to come and take a look at these recipes? Because recipes are really easy to put up. But I can pretty much guarantee you, and I've looked at the data, nobody is coming to those recipes and then going to do any valuable action for that particular organization. They're going to shut their browser and they're going to go cook that thing. So we're trying to keep things as simple as possible with the websites that we're building these days. This is from Facing History and Ourselves. You can see that what we've done, and while yes, that is a giant wall of text, the entire focus is on the content. We're not trying to distract them with a lot of flash. We're not trying to distract them with a lot of noise. But by the time they get down to the bottom of the page, through their action, through the very action of scrolling, even if they're only scanning that information, they're expressing an interest in that content. They're thinking that maybe there's something on this page is going to be interesting to me. So at the bottom, that's where we're putting the related content, saying, hey, you expressed interest in this, maybe you'd be interested in this, and also that's where the call to actions are. But it doesn't make a lot of sense at the very top of any particular web page to say, no, don't look at this thing that you've expressed interest in by clicking towards it. Why don't you go look at this instead, because we think that's going to be more valuable to you. You have to respect what people are coming to you for in the first place. And of course, it's probably pretty clear by now that I think that language is very important. I would imagine that as Drupal developers, as people who work in agencies and consult, that you have developed some very specialized languages. Like, we talk in acronyms, we talk in jargon, because it helps us do our jobs more quickly. It helps us say, or it saves us words, basically. We're trying to be as efficient as possible. I can have an entire conversation with my wife that nobody else in the world would understand, even though we're speaking English. And if I say something like, "Did you clear the CloudFront cache on AWS?" I imagine that most of the people in this room would understand that, but a lot of audiences, and our clients in particular, are not going to know that that was anything resembling English. So we use this shorthand to get the work done more quickly, but we need to make sure that we're not leaving the people that we're trying to connect with behind. We don't want to make them learn new concepts necessarily to understand the information that we're giving them. This is another example from the Southern Poverty Law Center. It's kind of their signature piece of content. And even if you don't know much about the hate map, just from the words hate map and those icons on the map, you can tell that something terrifying is going on. It takes very little information to get across their basic point that there are a lot of groups in the United States who are promoting hatred. And then they went ahead and added these 3 sentences that very quickly and concisely explain exactly what this is about and encourage people to take maybe some action. Like, this is very simple language, very simple images, but in the end it tells a complex story. And I would encourage you, when you're thinking about building websites, to include the way that you structure navigation as a part of the way that you're telling these stories. If you look at this website from the Forum of Regional Association of Grantmakers, who, aside from their name, have a very simple story to tell, you can look at the navigation across the top. You can see, oh, they're a membership organization. They hold events, they have some resources, and they do research. And as you scan down the page, please ignore the fact that there is a slider there, you can see that they've got that big, bold, highlighted text that is a sentence explaining what they do. And then they've got de-emphasized text that explains a little bit more what they do. And if you're really, really interested in that, you can click through to a page that will explain in detail what Frag does. Very quickly, in a very limited amount of space, they've given you a lot of information and kind of respected the fact that you don't have a lot of time in your day. We want you to tell stories and not policies. Very few people are going to go to a website and dig into the details of what your organization actually does. They want something that's going to help them in their own life. They are going to want to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. They want to find people who are like them. They don't care that you wrote this 50-page document that explains how you're going to create change in the world. Nobody's going to read that. I'm sorry. Because as I've said, stories are one of the most important kind of essential things that humans do to connect with each other. So when you're thinking about your organization's story, don't explain what you do, don't explain how you do it, explain why you do it. This is from an organization called Shatterproof. They are fighting addiction across the United States, the disease that is addiction. It was founded from a tragic story. The CEO of this nonprofit lost his son to opioid addiction, and he had the resources to be able to start this nonprofit. So he has this very compelling why behind the organization itself. But he didn't stop there, and to some degree we didn't let them stop, because opioid, or not just opioids, but addiction as a disease affects millions of people across the United States. So just saying, I lost my son, so I started this organization, and here are some resources for you, is not enough. They understand that this is something that impacts people across the country, and they gave all of these people the opportunity to tell their stories in various ways. So right next to that CEO story, they've got Faye, who is in recovery. Her son was an addict who managed to get treatment and is now in recovery. But They have the tools to tell this story, to create this emotional connection to people who may be having the same problem, so that they are maybe going to be more interested in exploring the resources and understanding that it is possible to beat this addiction if you do these certain things. But it's the story that's creating those connections, not so much the one-pager that they're getting out on how to find a treatment center. And finally, I would say that you need to some degree, stay true to you. Like, I've refrained from talking about the nature of truth because this is probably not the appropriate venue for that. But all of us have different perspectives. We all think different things. And the way that we express those things is going to come from, hopefully, what we believe to be true. When we're putting information out into the world, when we're generating this content that we're going to put out onto our websites, we kind of have a responsibility to be as true as possible. And this is from the SPLC again. When we were building this site, I had a lot of discussions with them about why they wanted to put comments up there. I mean, have any of you put comments on your website recently? Like, comments outside of a few sites is kind of a dying thing. People are less likely than ever to leave comments on websites because they're doing it all on Facebook and Twitter. But they were really adamant that they needed to have these comments. And the SPLC has one of the most active commenting communities that I've ever seen, both from the people who support them and from the people who hate them. They've given this kind of open forum and allowed their own members to police it. And they have some very, very fiery discussions on these boards. I don't know that I would encourage you to go read these things, particularly if you're looking to go to bed pretty soon. But they are having discussions about hatred, and it's just this back and forth between these two people. The SPLC understands that not everybody agrees with them. Like, they're actively fighting the people who disagree with them, but they're also giving them a forum to come and present their views and have a discussion with people who support the SPLC, in part because they hope that through these discussions, maybe somebody's mind is going to be changed. But basically, they stayed true to their nature by allowing this to happen. So narrative is a tricky thing. I'm not going to make fun of Chipotle, because I actually went there just a couple of days ago. And as I was going there, I was approached by an older African-American man. And he told me a story. He was 59. He was just getting out of treatment for drug addiction. And he didn't have a place to sleep. And he was hoping to get some money for one of the shelters in the Baltimore area, kind of just around the hotel here. And I don't carry cash anymore, but I offered to buy him a burrito. And so we went to Chipotle together, and I got him a burrito, and I got him an apple juice, and I had this momentary flash of feeling good about myself for having done something good in the world. But the basic problem there is that I don't know if he was telling the truth. It's possible that he was, that this story was something that had happened to him the day before. It's also possible that he had practiced this story for a long time and knew how to generate this feeling in me that made me want to help him. And short of going back and reviewing all of the closed-circuit cameras that are probably in this area to see if he shows up every day telling the same story, I have no way of evaluating the fundamental truth of what he was saying. It's just kind of the problem that we face as human beings. So when you go back from DrupalCon and you're absorbing all of the information that you've gotten from all the sessions that you're going, I'm encouraging you to tell those stories that you have. But I just want to remind you that there's been a tendency over the last couple of years, and really the decades before that, to reduce information to binary signals, to make everything good or bad, to make things yes or no, or right or wrong. Because from a marketing perspective, if there are only two choices facing you, it's very easy to use all of the techniques that I have talked about here to move people in one direction or another. But I think we all understand in here that life isn't really like that, and it's going to suit us a lot better as a species if we can get back into those shades of gray. Because in the end, I believe that most of us are not that far apart. Even if you like Suicide Squad, I will give you a hug. And then I'll explain all the reasons that I did not necessarily like Suicide Squad. But the only way that we can get this across is by telling these stories from a place of truth. We have to start with this idea that we're trying to put information into the world that is somehow going to move people in a direction that we want to, but we don't want to rely on all of those little tricks. We don't want to convince people just because we want power. We don't want to convince people just because we want to win something. We want to do it because we want to create more good in the world. And I believe that by telling our stories, we're going to connect with the people who are coming to us on an emotional level, and we're going to, I hope, start to bring some measure of balance back to the internet. That's what I've got for you today. Thanks for coming. Managed to do it in 50 or 40 minutes, or 50 minutes, so we got 10 minutes left for questions. Yes? Yeah, absolutely. We, even the SPLC, like sometimes they say things that make me a little bit uncomfortable, and yes, we're giving them the tools to do that. We also work with the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS. They are a center-right think tank who actually recommended Tillerson and said he would be a great Secretary of State, something that I fundamentally agree with. But I know at a basic level that they are approaching the information they're putting out from a place of integrity. Like they have people who are well-trained, well-educated, who've been thinking about these things for a long time. But I may not agree with them, but I'm certainly happy to give them the tools that are going to get their point of view out there so that we can have a reasonable discussion.
I'm just curious if you've ever dealt with organizations that have accidentally made a misstep that hurt their sort of was counter to their identity and wanted to rebrand to try to get back to that identity. How would you deal with something like that? I mean, we saw this, of course, with the Susan G. Komen Foundation, and you know that's it's a PR nightmare, but there's also like a branding aspect to it too.
Yes, the Komen Foundation. There have been a number of those sorts of missteps in terms of fundamental strategy. I can't actually think of an example from the organizations that we've worked with along those lines. Like, I know the Humane Society once had I think it was the Humane Society, once had a tweet go out about how somebody was going to get blitzed on some sort of alcohol because they didn't realize that Hootsuite was hooked up to their organizational account. But they very quickly went back and issued a funny apology. If you come up after the questions are done, I'd be happy to explore that a little bit more with you.
As you're working with clients and you are trying to tell them about your approach, the story-based approach and the truthiness and all that, do any of these clients try to kind of shrug that off a bit? Maybe they care about just raw metrics, traffic, hits, time on site, and they want to use these tricks. So does that happen, and how do you resolve that?
Oh, absolutely. But we do have a very strong analytics team at ThinkShout, so we can interpret the data in ways that support what we're saying. Not that we tilt the data in any particular way. Like if we see something in there that doesn't support what we think, we're certainly not going to do it just because. But yeah, it's a common thing. It's still rather novel for a lot of our clients as nonprofits to not just want to put their policy information out there, to say, hey, look at all these events that we have without explaining why people should go to those events. But I think they're starting to come around to it. At this point, we've developed a lot of the content. We've got a lot of numbers. We've got numbers from our current clients to kind of back up this approach. And I always like to say that every nonprofit, every organization, probably every website on the planet wants everybody to come to their website. Everybody is not a target audience. You have a limited number of people who are going to be willing to pay attention to them. And when you look at the data, you can find traces of what they actually want. So as I showed with that kind of University of Chicago example, we're trying to bring that information from the fore, connect that to the stories, and make sure that people are finding the information that they want, and as they're ready to move deeper, they're going to engage with those stories a little bit more.
Thank you.
So we're kind of existing in the world of fake news,
Yeah.
apparently. And I think that's created a element of skepticism for content on the web. And I was wondering in the past few months how you've been working to combat that.
Fortunately, the organizations that we work with don't put out that sort of information. This isn't just a problem for our clients or for this people in the room. This is kind of a problem for the world right now. One of the slides I almost included was about Facebook and how it became an echo chamber for the right. How many in here have gone through the phase where you unfriended all of the high school friends who you no longer agree with? That's how the echo chamber gets created. Suddenly they're starting to talk just to themselves, and they're not getting those kind of those other bits of information. So what we're really trying to do gets down to the technical level. Like, we're making sure that we're structuring things right. We're starting to use schema.org to make sure that SEO is working in our favor instead of against us. We're trying to think about what the next thing is in terms of the audio interfaces and how we can build websites that are going to respond to that so that we can get ahead of the curve on some of these things. But at the end of the day, it comes down to each of us encouraging discussion, not running away from people that we disagree with, not unfriending all of those friends from high school who say hateful things, but actually pushing back against them, pointing out that Breitbart is not an official source of news, and things like that. But yeah, if I had an answer for that, I'd probably be worth many millions of dollars right now, and all we can do is try our best.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
As we're going through a redesign phase in our organization as well, the idea of taking from an informational kind of putting just lots of stuff about what our department does here or our department does there, to the story idea to get to be able to present that better. What might be some more resources that I might leave and go use to continue that learning?
Great. Yeah, there are. That's probably too long for the 4 minutes that we have left. If you come up and give me your card, I can follow up with you.
And I was wondering, you mentioned that book, and I thought maybe there might be some other things.
Attention Merchants by Tim Wu. Okay. If you are interested in how people have gotten into our brains and kind of monopolized our attention over the last 100 years, it seems to be fantastic. I don't know exactly where he's leading to right now, but it is interesting, and hopefully we can start using these kind of marketing techniques, I don't want to call them tricks, in our favor.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, I have a question regarding targets. One thing that we are facing right now in my organization, it's we are particularly targeting a certain kind of professionals. I propose that we need to create, what do you say, a why people should come on this. And by proposing to extend our target, I think the particular target that we are looking for is not coming there because they are alone and they don't find another outlet. So right. We don't get the industry that is interested in that sector, and we don't get the clients that they are looking for. Is this a strategy? Makes sense as something that is done, or am I just wacko?
It absolutely makes sense. It can be very hard to build the audience for a lot of the reasons that I just said. So you do need to start using those marketing techniques. Nobody should consider a website to be a panacea. Like, the best made website in the world is not necessarily going to attract attention, even if you have the best structures for SEO. You need to do some sort of outreach, be that advertising, be that using social media to get people to pay attention to you, being that putting a billboard in the city that you're in to show people what you're trying to do. But to get the word out, we can't just build websites. We need to think about content strategy, not in terms of when we're going to get that next blog post up, but how we're going to get people to care about why we're doing it in the first place. Audience building is a very big very big topic, and hopefully we can get a session about that at DrupalCon at some point. Okay. Aha, that is a fantastic question. It is basically the guiding philosophy that governs how you are going to add content, not just to your website, but across all of the channels that you're doing. Content strategy is not this ethereal thing that's out there. It's actually a set of written documents and guidelines that governs everything from editorial voice to when you're going to be publishing content to how you're going to move a blog post through the review cycle. Like somebody's going to write it, I sure hope somebody's going to take a look at it before it's published, and then what are the rules for publishing that thing? It's essentially governance and how you're going to get your story out there. I'm sure that there is. There's a book by Christina Halverson called Content Strategy for the Web, which is fantastic. And also in answer to the why question and how stories can help, if you haven't seen Simon Sinek's TED Talk on Start With Why, I highly recommend that. He's got some great information there. He's also got, I think he wrote Leaders Eat Last recently, which has more information along the lines of what I've been talking about today. Yeah. I should remind you that there are going to be contribution sprints tomorrow. I would also like to remind you that you should evaluate this session so that hopefully DrupalCon will bring in many more content sessions or content strategy sessions in the future, and they also want you to evaluate the entire conference. Other than that, I just want to say thank you very much for giving me some of your attention. No, really, I mean it. Thank you very much. And you're welcome.
Supposed to record?
Huh?
We're supposed to record.
I have no idea. A tempo. We also do that, I guess.
I will be right back. I need to make sure that I get out of these gentlemen's way.
Was this yours?
Yeah. They mean like envelope. Quickly finish. Thanks. I'll be right down.
You're on the screen already.
Yeah, I know. Whoa.
Yes, I'm going to turn it into a PDF and I will upload it. It will be on the session page for my session, so you can just get a click for
think I can just go to present here.
Can you not do dual screens?